My next guest says, forget about all the bad news you've heard in the past number of years about the state of marriage. There is good news about marriage. In fact, that is the name of her new book, The Good News About Marriage, Debunking Discouraging Myths About Marriage and Divorce. Shaunti Feldhahn joins me today. Hey, Shaunti.
It's great to be with you.
Yeah, so as I said in the green room, I am so excited to chat with you. I literally have 3 pages of questions that I know we won't get to. But I want to hear this backstory. Why did you decide to write this book?
Oh, man. So I used to be a columnist, a syndicated newspaper columnist, and I was doing this column on divorce, and I wanted to correctly cite the divorce stats, you know, and looking at it, it's like, wow, this is a lot more complicated than I thought it was. And the data I was seeing didn't match the narrative that we've all heard, the conventional wisdom that, you know, half of all marriages end in divorce. And as I started looking at this, I'm like, okay, this is a big deal because I'm a social researcher. I spend all my time talking to average men and women about those kind of inner things that they don't normally share. And one of the things I had seen in marriages is that the belief that you might have trouble leads to trouble. And that it makes it easy to give up, and it makes it easy for it to become a self-fulfilling prophecy and to think, well, you know, half of everybody else couldn't make it either.
It's an excuse. It becomes an excuse.
Well, it's not even saying it's an excuse almost sounds like you're looking for an excuse.
Right, okay.
And I'm sure some people are, but most of the time what we found is that when we try to get people to work hard on their marriages, we use, oh, half of all marriages end, and we use that to motivate people. And I realized it was doing the opposite. It was demotivating. The biggest common denominator we found underneath whether a marriage survives or fails is whether the couple believes they're going to make it or not. And we're taking away that feeling they can make it. And it turns out, eventually, once I started digging into this for a number of years, I realized we're believing all these things that aren't even true. So that sense of futility and hopelessness is actually based on a complete myth.
That's what I love about this, because you said exactly what you just said, that most of the marriages that survive are marriages of hope. That they're hopeful that even if they're having tough times, and we all know marriages have tough times, they're hopeful that they're going to get through it.
Well, they believe that they will. And it makes a huge difference once you learn all the stuff that I'm sure we're going to talk about the real state of marriage. It makes an enormous difference to say, wait, if all these other people can make it, I can too. And it changes the paradigm completely.
So you go through, there are 5 good news points throughout the book, which I love. And the first good news point is the current divorce rate has never been close to 50%. In fact, closer to 30 to 40, maybe even as low as 20 in the 20s.
It's
like that blows my mind.
So in the 1970s, you know, no-fault divorce started, and you know, there was a spike in divorce. And the demographers of the day said, oh my goodness, if this keeps up, we're going to hit 50% someday. It was a projection. And most people don't realize that when they see the newspaper articles, you know, so researcher so-and-so projects a 40 to 50% divorce rate, they miss the word projects. We have never, ever hit that as society as a whole. Now, of course, there are some high-risk groups that do fall. Like if you get married as a teenager, you do have a higher divorce rate. But overall, it's never gotten close. And so what we don't know the exact divorce rates. We do know that, for example, about 1/3 of people overall, all marriages, about 1/3 of people have been divorced. We know that in first marriages, that this is Census Bureau information. By the way, these are not little sideline studies.
No,
you know,
these are huge studies.
These are big databases. We do know that according to the Census Bureau, 71% of people are still married to their first spouse. Like, that's huge. And the 29% that aren't, that includes everybody who was married for 50 years and their spouse died. That's just marriages that have ended. Nobody really knows what the first marriage divorce rate is. We can get closer. We can say, you know, it has to be less than 29, and it's probably more like in that 25% range. Now, okay, still too high. But a world of difference.
Better than 50%.
To be able to say, actually, most marriages last a lifetime. it changes the debate entirely.
Tell us about that cohabitating stat and the fact that a lot of people, are having children out of marriage. A lot of people are choosing not to get married.
Yeah.
And there was an interesting correlation with that.
Well, and I might point out, a lot of people are choosing not to get married because they don't believe that they can have a good lifelong marriage. It becomes that, again, that self-fulfilling prophecy. We did find that the researchers have found that people avoid often getting married because they're worried about it, right? And unfortunately, then we have found that those people who are cohabiting that do go ahead and then get married, that they are more likely to get divorced later because they kind of slid into marriage. It wasn't something where there was a positive decision. And we've found a lot of couples that probably would have broken up if they hadn't been living together, then go on to get married. So that's a higher risk. But we have also found the divorce rate has been declining for years, and the rise in cohabitation isn't the main reason. The main reason that the divorce rate's been declining so much, which is why we've never hit those projected rates, is because people are just getting married a little later, and that's usually a healthy thing for a marriage.
And you also found that people who have college degrees tend to stay together longer as well.
Yes. Yeah, it tends to be that there are some higher risk factors. If you were more college educated, statistically a little more likely to stay together. But the big lie that people have been believing is, well, if I'm not college educated or whatever, then I've got this huge chance, and that's not true. Remember that 25, 30%, that's the average. And there are many people that are down in the 5, 10% risk rate.
Yeah.
I mean, in the church, for example.
Yeah. So we're going to go to the next good news point. The vast majority of marriages are happy. Yeah. Around 80%. Happy marriages? What are those?
It's so funny because I'm a social researcher and I kind of interview people and ask random questions.
Yeah.
One of the things I've been asking recently, if I meet somebody on the airplane or in a coffee shop, is what percentage of marriages do you think are happy? If I ask 10 people that question, 8 of them are going to tell me about a third of marriages are happy. And they are shocked when I tell them there's actually been tons of studies on this. And they've all clustered around 80% of marriages being happy. Now, that's not perfect. But it's not roommates either, right? Most people just enjoy being married. And the good news, here's even the great news. For the people who are maybe in that 20% who aren't, that's not their reality right now. There was a great study that was done that found that if people stuck it out, they studied this huge sample size of people who were rated themselves as the most miserable in their marriages. If those people stuck it out, 80% of those people were very happy 5 years later.
What is it about that 5-year mark? What is it?
So this relates to one of the other things that I found in the good news about marriage. One of the other myths that we debunk is this idea that if you start having problems, that, oh my word, it's going to be 3 years of psychotherapy. and that, it's rocket science to fix problems.
And people think it's just easy just to get out of the marriage and just move on.
Well, people think it's not going to be fixable, right? And that or that if it is, you have to be a rocket scientist. And what we found is that in most cases, not all, but in most cases, it turns out that actually little things can sometimes make this really huge difference. The researchers of the day, when that study came out about 5 years later being very happy, they some researchers who don't believe in marriage kind of mocked it, like, oh, that's the spontaneous remission study, like just marriage problems just magically disappear. No. It makes sense that if little things make a big difference, and just learning a few things and going, wow, and applying them, if that's true, it makes perfect sense that you could be very happy 5 years later. So, for example, we tell women, one of the things we women don't know about men, little thing makes a big difference, is, he looks so confident,
Right.
And on the inside, men carry around a lot of self-doubt, and we don't know it's there. And it's basically the sense of, I want to be a great husband, but oh gosh, I don't know if I measure up. I don't know does my wife think I am? And it's kind of a raw nerve, and you can hit the nerve and make him feel like you're saying he's inadequate, he's an idiot, all these things you would never want to say. When you learn, oh wow, when I say, honey, why did you do this? And he feels that way, oh, okay, and stop saying it that way. and maybe look for things to appreciate and say thank you for, I know you were so tired and you took Johnny and you played ball in the yard anyway, you're such a great dad.
Seeing those things,
And
yeah.
you know what? Suddenly you start saying thank you, the temperature of your marriage changes, and it wasn't rocket science, it was just a little thing. It makes perfect sense that you could completely see a change in just a few years.
Shaunti, this is such a good conversation. We're going to have to continue it tomorrow. So we're going to be back with Shaunti tomorrow. Again, the book is called The Good News About Marriage, Debunking Discouraging Myths About Marriage and Divorce. Call your friends. Tell them that Shaunti's going to be back tomorrow talking about some of these amazing myths that we've heard about that we need to debunk.